welcome back to the How to Podcast series, where we talk all things podcasting and we bring on amazing people who do the podcast thing. And today I'm joined by someone from, as we say, across the pond, who's here to help us. And she's going to talk about her podcast, which is guaranteed to not fix you. Well, but we're going to get into that. And I'm so excited to have Nadine here on the podcast. She's actually listened to the show, which is really makes me happy because I listen to her show. So we're kind of doing this thing. And Nadine is a smart person. Ready, everyone? You're going to sit up very carefully and listen because we're going to talk about some great stuff. Nadine, welcome to the How to Podcast series as my guest co-host. So glad to have you here.
Well, it's absolutely delightful to be here. Although you did make me sound a bit like a teacher who's going to tell people off. I'm not going to tell anyone off, just so you know. I'm not going to tell you off.
Just pay attention, everyone. Just solid gold is coming here for you on the show. Right? It's good. Awesome. Tell everybody where you are, Nadine, in this great big world of ours.
I'm in the UK, in the north of England. So I live, in fact, I'm looking at the moment out of my window at trees and moorland. So I live, if any of you have ever seen All Creatures Great and Small or Happy Valley, I don't know whether those programs, I do believe they've made it across the pond to North America, then they're both set and filmed where I live. So I'm properly in the boonies, as we say, in the middle of nowhere. So in the north of England, in a place called Todmorden, which is, tiny little town. Love it. Near Manchester.
Everything there sounds so official. Like, everything has beautiful names. We don't have it. Our names aren't so creative here in Canada. I don't know. We need to step it up a little because yours sounds so rich and poetic and like you just want to go there. Ours is like Whitby. It's like, what is that?
Hey, we have a Whitby too
like,
in the north of England. Yeah, I imagine
there you go.
It was our what were they called? The Pilgrims who went across, and maybe they took Whitby with them, so to speak.
There you go. So we have Whitby. We have like Toronto. Hey.
But things that are familiar never sound exotic, do they? We need the unfamiliar.
Is that true?
I think so.
Is that true? Okay. All right. Well, let's go with that. I like that. That's a good diagnosis. I like that. Tell everybody what you do on top of being an amazing podcaster. What is your thing? Like, what do you do?
You say my podcast is called This Won't Fix You, but actually my job is to try and fix people. I'm a psychotherapist. I work in central Manchester and, people come to see me with things that are getting in their way. So relationship difficulties, people might feel that they're anxious all the time. They can't quite understand what's going on. Why do I feel compelled to see this person when actually I know they're really, really bad for me? So I specialise particularly in relationships, intimate relationships. I've got a psychosexual qualification as well, which is spicy. So I get lots of people coming to talk about sex, sexuality, relationships. That's my bag. And my podcast is a little bit more generic than that. So it looks at psychotherapeutic theory. That sounds really heavy. It doesn't. What it does is it takes the highlighted bits out of books that I've read. So it will take a metaphor or a model or an idea that I've encountered either in the therapy room that I develop with clients or in my reading. And then I just bring that one little snippet or idea to the podcast and then invite another therapist generally, but I've also had writers on there too. And I invite the therapist to come on and talk about that metaphor and how it affects people, how that metaphor might help people kind of view their life in a slightly different way. That's the A side of it anyway, which is kind of the meat and bones of the podcast. But then the B side, showing my age by having an A side and a B side.
I like it. I like it.
But the B side then is just me on the microphone. So my listeners get a kind of an intimate 10 or 20 minutes where I go a little bit deeper into some of the issues that the A side has risen, or generally one issue that the A side has risen, has presented, and then talk about what that might look like in therapy. So it's a really tender, intense exploration of feelings, dark feelings, often suffering, pain. That's my life. That's what I do.
Wow.
I submerge myself in pain and suffering, and I love it.
Tell me why you picked that name for your show, because it's very intriguing to me.
The This Won't Fix You title.
Yeah.
It's intriguing. That's interesting, because I went through all sorts of titles that were kind of quirky little metaphor, because it primarily deals with metaphor. And I just thought, no, there's plenty of podcasts out there that are purporting to fix people and, 10 steps to achieve success. But because I believe in therapy so much, I believe that that we need therapy, or more generically, love. Essentially, we need acceptance, love, and light to heal. And I don't believe that reading a self-help book, listening to a self-help podcast, I don't believe that those things can, in inverted commas, fix us, as in fix our processes, change the way that we view the world and that we interact with the people around us. That has to come from if we are harmed in relationship, we are healed in relationship. And so I don't believe that we get that from a book or even a podcast, although who knows, we'll see. I mean, I endeavor to give people things that are really helpful, but I don't want to pretend that a podcast can help somebody heal. I think that's a rather bold claim, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Question mark on your yes, though.
The thing I love about it is the fact that we can listen to it in the privacy of our day, and nobody knows what we're listening to. So there's a bond that's built between a listener and a host of a show, because you feed us and you nurture us through your words, and there's a companionship that happens in podcasting.
So you're saying there is a relationship?
I feel a connection to you as the host, because you keep showing up for me. So there's something that's happening there, whether it's kind of pseudo relationship, maybe not really truly, but I've found people have reached out to me who feel like they know me. And I've never met them in person. I have no idea who they are, but they're like, I've been listening to all of your episodes and I feel like I know I could pick you out of a crowd.
What's that like? I mean, you just kind of shocked look on your face. Then what is that like when people do feel like they know you?
It's so rewarding in a sense, because we show up to podcasting because we have a message for the world, whether it's just to entertain somebody or to help them through maybe something that could be a little bit difficult. But to know that your words have meaning beyond what's bouncing around in your brain or what you've read or what you know, but when you share it, and then it becomes public property, I guess, in podcasting.
Yeah, we lose ownership.
And then people take it and do what they want with it. So as a musician, I will record music in a studio, record it, put a song out with my friends, and people will come up to us and go, I love the song about, and they say whatever, fill in the blank. And we're like, what song is that? And we're like, but to them, they took it and they filtered it through their world and their experience. We didn't write a song about that, but they interpret it to mean something different for them. So again, we lose control over the result, but we just keep putting things out there. So I do feel there's a bond there as people listen.
I think we aim to have an impact, don't we? And having impact is a part of a relational dynamic, isn't it? To have an impact, we have to have an impact on each other in order to be in relationship. And while I think relationship is an umbrella term, and impact is a part of that. And so you're absolutely right in that sense. I agree with you. I'm interested in your perspective. You've just kind of made me think. Yeah, can a podcast be relational if somebody else gets in touch? And you've spoken about using speak pipes, so you do have two-way.
There is a communication piece there, and it actually does work. I mention it often, but a gentleman from Poland reached out to me. And, again, an email comes in. I don't know what this message is. It just tells me I have a message. So I click play, and his name is Kuba, and he lives in Warsaw, Poland. He's like, Dave, I listened to 100 episodes. I love what you do. Just wanted to say thank you. And it's like, wow, like here I am in my little house in Canada, and someone in Warsaw, Poland is listening to 100 episodes of my show. Like, that's just mind-boggling
so
to me. Right?
That he needs to
actually do something. Yeah, right? So in that moment, you're like, the world is smaller than I thought it was.
And you're impacted by him then. Right. And you feel like what you're doing is reaching those miles. And I imagine you feel compelled. We feel compelled. So when our folks get in touch with us, we feel compelled to respond, to reply, to have a bit more two-way, because otherwise it can feel like we're just shouting into a void. So for those of you listening, I think it is really helpful when people do get in touch. It genuinely feels there is a dynamic that we have something together. We're sharing something rather than it just being me speaking, you speaking into the darkness.
I like that. And I love that about podcasting. I think that we can develop that more by making it easy for people to reach us. So anything you can do, like a speak pipe, what's one alternative. But whatever you can do to make it easy for them, email, whatever, allows them to reach out to you and communicate with the host that they have fallen in love with and feel akin to. They just want to know that you're a real person at the end of the day, even just to give you a words of thanks. I also leverage my Buy Me a Coffee. It's a simple way for someone to say thank you financially, and they leave you a $5 or something, and it's just for them to say thanks. Because I think that spirit of giving back, people want to acknowledge something that gives them value, so they feel like, I wish I could do something. So I use my speak pipe and my Buy Me a Coffee as two arms of engagement for my show. I just leave them out there. I don't really promote them much, but I find people like to use them, and it always helps me to help other people when they do that. So anyway, yeah, I love the connection you can have with your audience. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. Awesome. I want to know, you mentioned that you had listened to some of my episodes. How did you find the How to Podcast series? I'm interested to hear that part.
I go through Apple Podcasts for all my podcasts. And at the end of one of the emails that we'd exchanged, you've got a list with all the links on, because I'd struggled to find your How to Podcast series through the Apple the Apple Podcast app. So I used the links that you sent on the bottom. But I did find what I found easily was one of your, what's the one, it's got your name in it, something Dave, where it's just you talking, and there was some beautiful music in the background. It was like I was in a flotation tank listening to you. It's like a special title you give it. What was it called?
I call them the Daily Daves. My Daily Daves.
That's the badger. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, and you had this beautiful music on in the background. Felt like I had to be in the bath or something to listen.
Right.
You really set an atmosphere.
Yeah.
I thought it was gorgeous. Not required.
Yeah, that's one. I wanted it to stand out a little different. And the idea about my show is I want my show to experiment and show you different ways to do things. So I'm actually playing with my podcast at the same time to demonstrate different ways to do your podcast. So I'm doing things in real life to show you can do a mini series within your own podcast around a topic and do 5 episodes around something specific and then go back to your normal thing. So I do little mini series. I do my Daily Daves. I do guest co-hosts. I do my solo episodes. I do shout outs for podcasters where I throw the spotlight on a different podcast. I just want you to see that you can do different things. Throw music behind your voice. Do things without music behind your voice. I'm just playing. So, and then people are like, I like that. I'm going to steal that idea. Perfect. That's why I'm doing this. So, yeah, I'm glad you like the Daily Daves.
I think what I'd like to do is steal your idea of being more playful. I think I do like a good rule book. And I like the fact that you can just kind of have a guideline, maybe a guide. What do they say? A skeleton, not a straitjacket. So something that kind of supports a sort of general structure, but doesn't necessarily constrict that general structure. And I think I'm a little bit wedded to structure. And so I that's what I'm inspired by, is your playfulness there, that you can just go, yeah, I'm going to try this. So I did I became friendly with a woman who does a podcast over here in the UK called The Wilderness of Creativity. And we met through a little podcast group. And so we did a Meet the Host where we rolled a dice, which sounded like a boulder on the table. We clearly got the recording wrong. The dice sounded 10 foot square. It was hilarious. But we did this little Ask the Host, and we're very, very different people, and we brought out very different sides of each other, and it was really lovely. And I just popped it in my feed, and I perhaps wouldn't have done that, had I not heard your more playful ways of presenting things. Like there are no rules because it's my podcast. I'm not trying to impress any kind of producer here or scheduling manager. It's just me. And if people don't like it, then they can just skip that episode and go back to the stuff that feels more structured. Fine. But it was fun, and people have enjoyed it. They really enjoyed that, and they also enjoyed the dice roll, which was comedy.
There you go. Real-time effects in your podcast. I like that. The one thing I encourage a lot of podcasters is to kind of not just find your voice, but find the tone for your show? Is it loud and brass? Is it calm and reflective? Is it happy? Is it contemplative? Like, what is it? Like, what's the tone? Like, what does it feel like? If it was a restaurant, is it fast serve? Like, get in, get out? Is it more sit down and someone's playing a violin beside you and you have a 3-hour dinner ahead of you? Like, what does this feel like? What's the tone of your show? I think that's one thing we could do better, is to kind of nail down what we want people to feel when they come to our show. So if I was asked you, Nadine, what is the tone of your podcast?
That's lovely, isn't it? Who was it? Some very clever person once said, people may forget what you say, but they'll never forget how they made you feel, how you made me. And I think that's what you're trying to say, isn't it? That actually the tone and the mood and the feeling is what affects us as much as the content of it. Well, because of my A-side, B-side, I think they've got a very different feel. So the A-side with the co-host is 45 minutes long, and it's definitely a bit of a lighter. I mean, we are talking about death, pain, abandonment, those kind of things, shame, anxiety, but there is still a lightness to it because it's a conversation. But it's serious content, but not necessarily seriously handled. We often, have a lightness about us, but it's not laugh out loud funny. So if it was a restaurant, I guess it would be, it would be a little independent restaurant where they play plinky plonky piano music in the background, and the wait staff know your name, and you might go there once every 3 months because it's slightly more expensive than the one around the corner. But they might just pop in once in a while. But it's quite an intense experience. The flavors are pretty rich, so you might not be able to eat there too many times in a month because it might feel a bit overpowering. And my B-side, it is a much more of an intimate, 2 people romantic date. It's me and my listener in a booth, staring into each other's eyes over a candle. That's definitely the restaurant of the B-side. So I get to play with the 2 different. And the co-host then was much, much lighter because I'm a psychotherapist, I don't really give a lot away about myself, and that feels counterintuitive, really. I don't want it to affect the people that come in my room and that they're hearing my story so that somehow they might feel like they have to carry me, emotionally speaking. And so having the meet the host, it felt like a little bracketed way of bringing myself so that people didn't feel like I was some guru on a pole, some distant guru on a pole who knew everything and was, all sorted and together. I kind of showed a little bit more vulnerability in that. So that allowed a bit more of that kind of light playfulness. Does all of that make sense? I feel like that was quite a long response to your very simple question.
No, I like it. And for those listening, I'm asking you in this moment too, as you listen to Nadine talk about her show, what's your show like? Like, how are you like a drive-through? You don't even go in the restaurant. You just pull up to a window, somebody throws something at you as you drive away. Is that your podcast? Like, is it really quick? And like, that could be your show. But I had somebody yesterday tell me they listened to my show, and they said in a world of people who create content that are like, it's quick, it's like 5 points, you're kind of like, they do the show and you're done. And it's like so quick and fast and to the point. They said my show felt more relaxed and more like kind of like slow down, relax. And they've said it felt so different from everything else that they listen to on a regular basis. They just were like, why is this so different? Oh, David slowed right down. Like, Dave's not like in a hurry in his show. He's just Dave, right? And they're like, it felt weird because I'm always in a hurry and I'm like on the run and you're like, slow it down, everybody, And he's like, I loved it. I love the idea that it's slow. It's slower. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not doing that on purpose. That's just who I am. Right. So I want that to come through in my podcast.
I think that's an important bit of advice, isn't it? Especially for anybody starting, is don't try and be somebody else. Because I couldn't speak slowly if I tried. It's just not, it would sound like I was not really knowing what I was going to say next. Whereas you, absolutely, I can totally see why that listener gave you that feedback. It is lovely. Your manner is so calming. It is lovely. I can see why somebody would feel the need to tell you that.
I just hope I'm not putting people to sleep because it's not meant to be a sleep podcast to help you fall asleep at night. Like that's not my mission. But anyways, because I listen to some shows And it sounds like the host is running down a very steep hill while trying to have a conversation because they sound like they're out of breath and they're like, oh my gosh, and they're like so fast. I'm like, do you breathe? Like, I don't know how you breathe. Can you slow it down a little? I can't. I'm getting anxious listening. So, so there's that as well. So yeah, we're all different. We're all going to approach it differently. And I love that the podcast space has room for all of us. Right. That's what I love.
I wonder if those fast ones are edited. That they edit the quiet bits out.
Yeah.
Because I think we live in a world now where advert transitions in films, they all move so much quicker. And yeah, I operate in a slow universe, of course, working in psychotherapy. Yeah. People don't come in. We're not sitting there, right? Okay, right, sleeves rolled up. Let's go. It doesn't happen. I mean, imagine if
we don't have chairs. We don't have chairs. You stand. We're going to do this and get this over with.
Yeah,
I got 10 more people waiting.
Yeah. Just keep moving.
No, we talked a little bit about. Let's expand on this a little bit more. It's just that organic conversations we have with people. How important is that for you as a host to have those meaningful conversations with your guests, your co-hosts? Like, why organic conversation over more general conversation, I guess, in podcasting? Why is that important to you in your show?
I think I'm conflicted about how I'm handling that. And, bear in mind, I'm only kind of 15 episodes in at the moment. I don't know how long the delay will be before this comes out. So maybe a few more, but small numbers. And the conflict for me, I think, is I have a vision for the podcast that's really important to me and I believe in it. But at the same time, I don't want to curtail then somebody when they are coming on the show and they've got something that they want to say and they're developing a story or taking us down a path. So I'm conflicted really about, I think it's a balance, isn't it? So yes, have the vision. Absolutely. I'm trying to hold my vision at the same time as trying to allow a little bit of breathe in there, a little bit of, like you say, organic postulations, organic meanderings of the conversation. And I've not figured it out. I don't know whether I've got that right yet. I think I sacrificed vision in my early days because I was so delighted that people were coming on my show. And so I think I dropped my vision a little bit too readily. And I'm tightening that up a little bit now. So I think it's a bit of a push-pull. And I think it was a valuable thing, again, for folks listening who are not yet set up a podcast or who are in the early days. I think it's really important to just get it out there and see how it feels. Those first kind of 10 episodes were massive just to get a feel for how this whole process works. And then I took a little bit of a pause and reflected, looked at how I was developing it, how I was getting guests and co-hosts on there and how I was writing the B-side and just had a little bit of a think. But I needed the 10 episodes to have us dirty. You can't do it all in your head. You can't create the perfect finished product in your head. You have to actually throw it out there and see what your friends think when they listen to it. And I had some very honest friends, thankfully, who gave me some very honest feedback, which was really helpful. I really, really welcome that. And I think it helped, tweak. In fact, the B-side, it was an idea that came from a friend. It's not inside my head, that one. That came from a friend. Thank you, Hannah. Does that answer your question again? So I think what I'm saying is it's a sliding scale, isn't it? For me, anyway.
Yeah, and what I love about your A-side, B-side idea, again, thanks, Hannah, is the fact that we get time with you one-on-one as a listener. When you have a guest or a co-host on your episode, we feel like we're sharing you with that person in the moment. Mm-hmm. So we, in the audience, are kind of a spectator in that moment because you're having a conversation with someone else, and we're just there to listen. So we're that fly on the wall. We're just... Mm-hmm. We're kind of in some podcasts, I'm not saying yours, but in some, we're kind of an afterthought, like we're just an audience member, right? For some shows. Mm-hmm. And then when you turn the mic towards us, then you're talking to us directly. And I think that's a moment where you build relationship because now I don't have to share you with somebody. I get you one-on-one. And it feels closer to what it's like to work with you, maybe, in a sense, because now I get your full attention as the host. I don't have to share you with anyone. I'm a little selfish as a listener. I need more of you.
It's indulgent.
And the fact, right, it is. And when you have a podcast that's all interview, I have my Living the Next Chapter podcast. It's an author podcast. I talk very little on that show at all. It's all about my guest. It's all about authors from around the world and their journey as an author. I'm not an author, and I'm the host of the show. I have nothing to contribute to the conversation about writing because I've never done it. So I throw the spotlight on my guest. So my audience doesn't hear me hardly at all. And I never talk to my audience one-on-one in that show. I do that on purpose because I have 7 other podcasts where I do that. This one, I'm purposely not doing that. And it's a very different Dave in that moment because I don't have that one-on-one connection with my audience. So
does that make
it's very different.
Whether I'm analyzing too far, but it's like then you are the mouthpiece for your audience because they want to hear from the author. And so you then are trying to ask the questions that you know that the people are going to want to hear the answers to. So maybe, I mean, you're saying that you have to share, and I think that's a really beautiful, like, it's a penny drop moment there when you said that. Yeah, they're having to share me in my A-side. And I felt I had to share you when I listened to the particular episode with the guy who set up a camping business that we were speaking about. Mike. But to actually see it, maybe as an interviewer, what we're trying to do is generate a question that we are certain our audience is going to want to ask based on the thing that the author has just said, so that we're trying to develop and grow and expand in that way. So I think, plus and minus, isn't it? Like you're saying, different people will respond to different things.
So I've actually had, for Living the Next Chapter, I've had people reach out to me, listeners, and say, the moment I had a question for that author, you asked it. It's like, how did you know? Well, I recorded that 3 months ago, but, like I didn't know that would be your question, but I feel like I am a representation of my audience in that moment. So I'm going to ask you questions that I don't know the answer to. And because I'm not an author, I have no idea what it takes to write a book. So the expert in the room is my guest. And I purposely move into the audience for that show and kind of scurry up to the mic, ask a question, and then go join my friends in the audience for the answer. That's kind of how I do that. So the whole spotlight is not on me at all. I'm almost replaceable in that moment because it's about the guest.
Right. And so, in inverted commas, you should be replaceable because, like you say, it's not about you.
Yeah. So that's purposely different than the How to Podcast series. Right. It's where I take a different role. So I get to wear different hats and I get to move around and be a chameleon and do different things in different locations. And that's the beauty of having multiple podcasts. Not that I'm encouraging that, but it does give you the opportunity to play a little bit more and be a different person. So I get to explore different parts of me as a host, which makes me better, I think, all around.
Sure.
When I get to do that.
And that's
I like that you do that in your show. You do that in your show, though. You're doing multiple things. You're not just going down one path. You're not just interviewing. You're not just co-hosting. We get you as well on the B-side. So I think you're doing a very smart thing. So again, Hannah, thank you for that.
I think it is, like you say, it's a shop window so people get a sense. Because when you're choosing a psychotherapist, I don't know what it's like over there in Canada, but people choosing a psychotherapist don't have an awful lot of information to go on. They get a couple of paragraphs on a directory website and they have to make a decision about this person. I'm going to share all my darkest shames, anxieties, fears, sadnesses with this person that I've got 3 paragraphs of black and white text about. So the B-side was exactly that. I thought, this is a great opportunity for me to show people who I am, and then people can choose me or not. Like you say, people think that you sound slow and calm, and that's gorgeous, because then people will come to that if that's what they want. I don't want people to come into my therapy room who don't, like, kind of, as the young people would say, click with my vibe. I don't want that.
Wow.
And maybe they wouldn't say that. It's got to be said.
we could do whatever we want. It's our podcast. Dang it. We can do whatever we want. Wow. That's okay. My vibe. Yeah, there you go. I like that. As far as your show, how much prep do you do when you mentioned you bring people on your show? Or you feel like you're well prepared, over prepared, under prepared for your people when they come on?
I think
what's your focus?
Such a great question, isn't it? Because that links to the question you just asked. I think if we go into an interview or a conversation and we've got an A4 pad full of questions or places that we want to go, then we might feel a little bit tied to that. We might feel bullied by that in the conversation and feel like we have to get all our points across. And then we're losing that the very kernel of what makes a podcast so beautiful, which is the conversation. It is that organic movement and allowing the co-host, the guest, to take it where they want to go, because they've also done quite a bit of prep. So for me, I think I do less prep, but it's more focused. So I kind of have a list of ideas of things that I could say, but I'm very rarely getting anything in a category of things I have to say. I think the prep mainly comes from how do I want to, what structured segments do I want to take the listener through? So I've recently done an episode on the film Gravity. Don't know whether you've seen that, with Sandra Bullock from quite a few years ago. And a therapist who's also a film buff friend of mine. Well, she's not really a friend. She's become a friend through the podcast, but she wasn't before. And she's come on and I knew that I wanted to talk about that scene. And I knew I wanted to talk about that scene and generally take the listener through the journey that Sandra Bullock's character Ryan Stone goes on in the film. So I kind of pinned the structure down of the podcast episode, but I didn't pin down the content, because my co-host Anushka is beautiful. She's eloquent and she's got so much to say that's far more interesting than anything that I could come up with, like you say about your authors. So why would I want to hear the sound of my own voice over hers? Because she's got so much expertise and she can articulate it so beautifully. So yeah, structure of the episode feels more important to me than content of the episode for me to be in charge of, so to speak. So I have to know my theory. So if I'm taking a quote or a theory or a model, I've got to know it.
Yeah.
But that's not king in the episode, I don't think.
I love what happens after we stop recording. I've had so many great conversations after we're done. And we're like, we're done. Okay, thanks, everybody. Goodbye. And then I hit stop. And one of the most frequent things I get for feedback from my guest is, who are you? And I'm like, what? They're like, no, who are you? Like, I've had authors say, I have never thought of my character in that light before. Like, now you're making me rethink my book. Like, now I don't know what to do next. Or I just know what my next book is now because of this conversation. I know what I'm going to go start writing right now. I didn't know. I was stuck. And now it's clear as day. I know exactly where I'm going to go next. They're like, who are you? Like, how did you know to ask that question? No one's ever talked to me about that before. And I just tell them, I'm just listening to you. I'm just a curious person. I'll show them my clipboard. I have nothing on my paper. I have no questions written at all. I don't even know what I'm going to say next. I'm just listening to you and following the conversation, because that's what a listener would do, right? That's how we communicate over a coffee or a tea. We be sitting there just having a conversation. I don't have like a structured thing all written out where I'm going to know exactly where I'm going next with you in a conversation. I don't know what's going to happen next. And that's what I think maybe it takes time to get to that part. If you're a new podcaster, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine not having a single question written down. That's not to say you don't have to do that right away, but over time, you'll learn to lean less on those things, because you're going to just want to talk to the person in front of you and learn from them. So don't be so tied to it where you feel like you have to follow A, B, and C. Sometimes your guest might say something and it makes you go, hang on, wait a minute, what did you just say? Can we talk about that? Because I want to know more about that piece. And it just opens the door to go down a path you weren't expecting to go down. And then that makes people lean in. As a listener, they're like, I want to know what's going to happen here. Because again, I don't even know. So that's what I find interesting in podcasting, is you can do your show any way you want, but any way you can bring the audience in with you. And we've done it a couple times here already, but addressing them, bringing them into the conversation, acknowledging them. One podcaster I love, her name is Mel Robbins here in North America. She purposely will pause her guest and then speak to you as a listener and then come back to the guest. It's like the guest is like looking around like, what's happening? But she's talking to her listener. She's like, did you just hear what Nadine just said? That was the best. And I just wanted to reinforce that Nadine is like an expert in this. And if you need anything that kind of help, you need to go talk to Nadine. But let's just summarize. Nadine just pointed out this major point. And for me, that really means a lot. Back to Nadine. Nadine, now let's continue the conversation. It's like, as a listener, you're like, hang on, she just took time out to talk to me. Like, right? That's just such a good feeling for a listener if we can ever do that in our show.
You're talking about your curiosity, aren't you? You're talking about that.
Right.
That's what you're bringing. So when you've got your notepad that's got no questions on it whatsoever, what you've got is your attention. That's what you're bringing.
Yeah.
What is it that this person is telling me, and what is it sparking in my head? And most people, if they have a list of questions, then they're not going to be as liberated and as curious, are they? Because we're like you just said, we are bullied then by the list of questions that we've got, because they become more important than the amazing thing that person just said.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it goes to connection and disconnection. So when I hear a podcaster ask a great question of their guest, the guest finishes this beautiful answer and they go, okay, question number 2. And it's like, wait a minute, hang on. They just gave you something that was gold and you just let it go right by you. So acknowledge the answer, acknowledge the response, and be connected. I find that podcasting has made my marriage better.
Ooh, I'm interested in that.
I listen to my wife when she speaks to me because I do that on a podcast multiple times a day. So I'm not distracted by my devices. I'm not distracted by something else. I'm paying attention to her. And I know to shut up. I know to be quiet when she's speaking because I do that on my show. My early days, I would misdirect my guest. I'd ask them a question. They're midway through their answer and something would pop in my head and I'd blurt it out. Now I've distracted them from their initial answer and now they're on a new path on this next question I've thrown at them or new thought, and they don't come back to the answer they originally started answering. And my audience went, Dave, please stop doing that. When Nadine is answering a question, could you please stop interrupting her? Because I want to hear the answer. It was a good question, and it was an even better answer. So stop it. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to stop doing that. And that was great feedback because I was just so caught up in the moment and I was nervous. I want to make sure I was doing my best podcast ever, that I was distracting my guests, right? And frustrating them. So stop. I was told to stop. And I did right away, which then fed into my marriage. And when my wife's speaking to me, I'm focused on her. So my wife loves it. And she also loves that I'm talked out by the time I get home. She gets home from work and I'm just nice and quiet. I've said too many words already today because of my podcast. I'll just be quiet now. So she loves that. It's a win-win. So.
I was going to ask you what she felt about it, but that's clear. How can anybody not? Who doesn't like to be attended to?
And I think in a world of social media and everything going around us, this type of connection, having time with you in this way, like how would I have ever met you? How would I ever have time in your calendar to meet some guy in Canada and chat about this type of stuff? Had it not been for podcasting, this is a connection I would truly miss, really, to have this kind of connection with you. So that's what I find value in podcasting. Beyond creating a show and having listeners and blah, 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 it's the human connection. I think we all could do better in that. And I think podcasting is a great way to develop that better. So I'm a big fan. If you haven't noticed, I'm a big fan.
That is evident. I feel a little bit moved by that speech. That's really beautiful. And I think there's a lot of evidence and research that says that social media is bad for us unless we use it to form real world connections. And I think podcasting, this conversation you and I are having, the way that your listeners now are listening to us, I think they're real world connections. Because it's not text, it's not type on a screen. It's a person. So even though it is a voice to the listeners, even though those people are hearing voices, so to speak, and we are looking at each other, but it is a real world connection, even though we're looking at each other through a screen.
Right.
Because we're not relying on text. Yeah, I'm getting a big chunk of you, I feel like.
We are technically the voices in your head right now.
Yeah.
That's what we are right now.
Be very alarmed.
Warning. It's great. I could talk to you all day, obviously, but I know you have things to do. And I'm just thrilled to have time with you and to talk about your show and to send people to you because I want them to come listen to your show and do all the things we ask people to do at the end of a podcast. But Can you just kind of share a little bit more about your show as we wrap up, and kind of where is a good starting point for a new listener coming to your podcast? Start at the beginning, start at the most recent episode. Where do we go? And kind of give us a little oversight about your show.
That's a great question. People always ask, where can people find you? But they don't ask which is a good episode or where is a good episode to start. I like that, stealing that one right now.
There you go. Done.
If I had time, I'd be writing that one down. The show is called This Won't Fix You. It's got a little orange logo. And this is the thing, I had to design it all myself because it's just me, right? I don't have a team doing production or anything like that. So I sat at my Mac and designed the logo, which took 742 years, it felt. Anyway, so it's a little orange logo, This Won't Fix You. It's based on psychotherapeutic metaphors or models or ideas, which sounds a little bit grandiose, doesn't it, if you're not in the therapy world? But some of the stuff's really straightforward. Like, for instance, there's a false self and a true self that we all have. We have a true self that's really ours, and who we would be if we hadn't been kind of maneuvered by society and social expectations to create a false self. So it's a really simple idea. That's not, it's a metaphor, it's a model that is used within psychotherapy. So that's one that's coming up in a few episodes' time. So they're not highfalutin, for want of a better phrase. I would start with the recent ones. I would start with an A-side from recent, and then I would listen to a B-side, because I was a novice when I first set up. I mean, episode 1 is a corker. Episode 1 with my friend Katie Bunting about our flaws and our shame is a corker of an episode because she's a very good friend of mine, and so the conversation flows. But there's also one on anxiety, which is good, and the one I mentioned earlier on the film Gravity and the film Frozen. They're also good A-sides to start with. The best B-side is Jung's shadow theory, which is, again, sounds like it's very theoretical, but it's not. It's the one that people have said, I had to stop it 20 times just to take on board what you were saying, because I felt like you were speaking to me directly. So the Jung shadow theory has been the most powerful B-side.
Okay.
Hope that helps.
See? Beautiful. I love it. And it's available where all podcasts are sold, right? Everywhere.
Absolutely. I'm not selling it. It's free.
It's free. It's all free, right? It's always free. And then website or anything, where can we go?
Thiswon'tfixyou.com. Thiswon'tfixyou.com. Yeah, nobody had stolen that URL, so I was grand.
There you go. You got it. You got it. Okay, last piece of advice for a podcaster. Anything. Wide open. You can talk about anything. What do you want to leave us with? How can we encourage somebody in podcast space today?
Oh, because the thing I'm thinking immediately is all cliche. Can I take a moment, Dave? Yeah. What do I think is the most important thing? Oh, no, it's just popped in and it's right there. Take advice.
Boing.
Genuinely invite genuine criticism and feedback from a handful of people whose opinions you trust.
Okay.
And even if your podcast is up and running, I mean, we can all learn, can't we? Still. Right. And I think we can't assume that what we know, that how we produce our podcast is the best way to do it. So, yeah, invite honest feedback that's not just blowing smoke up your arse, so to speak.
Beautiful. Excellent. So we have smoke, we got bandages to fix you that won't fix you, and a great host that's going to help you with an A-side and a B-side to their podcast. Very unique, very special, and I love that you have that. Again, thanks, Hannah. And thank you for making time, Nadine, to come on the show as a guest co-host. Excited to watch your journey over here in Canada and just cheering you on. Just keep going, keep doing your thing. You're doing something special in the world, and more people need to know about you so we can help more people. So I know you're not going to hear to fix us, but you're going to help us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dave. It's not been something I've made time for. It's something I am delighted to share my time with you. It's been really lovely. Thank you.
Excellent. Everyone, all the information for Nadine and her show in the show notes. Please go and support an amazing podcaster. Please like, review, share, follow, do all the things. Tell somebody about her show as well so we can get some more listens. Let's blow this thing up, everybody. You can do this. Nadine, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast all the way through to the end. I love having these great guest co-hosts on the show to share their podcast with you. You have some homework to do. And what I'm asking of you is to go check out our featured guest co-host today. Go over and listen to their podcast. The links are always in the show notes. And I'd love for you to go and give them your love and support. And I think if we can all do that for each other, podcasting will be a lot more fun for all of us. So it's time to do what you've asked others to do for you. It's time to do for this guest co-host. Links in the show notes. Go over and check out their show and leave them a review, do the follow, go listen to their episodes in full, the entirety of an episode, which again shows to the apps that it's a good podcast because you're going there and you're staying to the end. It's probably one of the best ways you can help a podcaster grow their audience and be shown to more people is by simply going and listening wherever you listen to the very end, like you're doing right now here. This is the perfect way to signal to wherever you're listening on, this is a podcast worth promoting. And all of the apps want you to stay on as long as possible. So go over and listen to our guest co-host episode and leave them some feedback. If they have a buy me a coffee, send them a coffee. If they have a speak pipe, send them a voice message. If they have an email, send them an email. If they're on Instagram, send them a direct message. Do something to support our guest co-hosts. They've given up their time to be here with you, to be here with me, and we can give that back to them with time and attention, our love, our support. Thank you for doing all that for me as well. Here on the How to Podcast series, we'll talk to you soon for our next episode.